it's actually great to be invited back to talk about Australian drawing. When we came in, I said to Perry, my wife, I could actually probably talk for 2 hours on this exhibition, but I won't. I just want to say some things about it. Like all of Lauraine's exhibitions, it's very beautifully crafted to be a kind of statement of significance about a particular field in Australian art. And in a way, I think of this exhibition as being really a kind of history of Australian drawing. There are really major figures in this exhibition, really major drawings, and drawings that help us to understand the work of these painters. And I thought today I'd just almost like a floor talk in a gallery, just point out maybe 6 drawings that seem to me in this exhibition to say something wider about the history of drawing in Australia. When I wrote that book, Drawing in Australia, I tried to work out what it was that was interesting in the shape of drawing in this country. And I kind of had these 2 ideas. One of them was that in the 19th century, artists were very content to see drawings as, in the words of Conrad Martins, the great colonial artist, a means to an end. Drawings were really trying to find out what was in, say, a landscape subject, and that would become a print or a painting. But the drawing in itself was leading to something else. By the 1880s, that changes absolutely. And in 1882, there was an exhibition which was put on by the Victorian Artists Society. It was an exhibition of drawings. And there was a new innovation. And the critic, James Smith, who was the great 19th century critic of the Argus, said, what we're looking for in this exhibition is for the drawings to have poetic suggestiveness. And therefore, this was a change, because drawings then were looked at for their own intrinsic qualities. And poetic suggestiveness is something I think we find in drawing even today. So that was a big shift. The other interesting thing that characterises Australian drawings, I think, is the range of subjects that you get in drawings that you don't necessarily get in larger paintings. So the history of Australian drawing is full of all of these very quirky, very unusual and very simple observations of life in Australia, the landscape and people, and circumstances which didn't necessarily ever become larger statements, but which remained these beautiful observations. And that, I think, is one of the things that makes drawing so exciting and so appealing. Now, in this exhibition, as I said, it does read as a kind of sequence through Australian drawing. One artist who I think is perhaps due for much greater recognition in Australia than he's received is Louis Bouvalot. I think we're all waiting for the great Bouvalot exhibition. His contemporary Von Gerard has really been given a huge amount of exposure in art museums in Australia. But Bouvalot, I think, was the great master of the intimate view of the landscape, and it's in drawing that you see that really beautiful selection of drawings in this exhibition, of fern gullies, a corner of Treasury Gardens, simple observations and full of really interesting detail. They really reward a close look. It's a beautiful drawing in this exhibition by William Strutt, the celebrated Arab mayor. Strutt was, when he came to Australia in 1850, the best trained artist to work in Australia in the 19th century. And I think in that drawing, it really rewards close scrutiny. You can see the way in which he used the pencil and the watercolour wash in an extraordinary way to bring out the anatomy of that horse. And Strutt really was the great early 19th century Australian draftsmen. In the 1880s in Australia, an interesting phenomenon was the way in which there was very little distinction between what artists considered to be serious work and what they considered to be their bread and butter work, which was illustration. They would work very precisely on their illustrations. And so this became a part of the whole world of what was called black and white art in Australia. And I was fascinated in this exhibition to see Esther Patterson sort of carrying the can for black and white art with that wonderful poster for the artist's Smoke Night. And what's fabulous about it is the figure, they're all in fancy dress, and the figure of the woman with a hand pointing to the bit at the bottom that says "Ladies Not Admitted," and two blokes in fancy dress going to the tent to have whatever I don't know what they did. Smoke nights, what smoke nights actually were in 1911, but they were very blokey events, and I think Esther Patterson had a little kind of fascinating little suffragette dig in that drawing. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful work, The Savage Club. One of the drawings in this exhibition that absolutely fascinates me is the drawing of Pishery's Farm by Max Meldrum. Now, Max Meldrum, as we all know, was a tonal painter, and late in his life tended to make these statements like, there are no lines in nature. Well, the drawing gives the lie to that, but it also points out what a beautiful tonalist he was, even from the beginning of his career. It's all about the precise tonal values. You can look in through the doorway, you can see the sunlight coming in, there's some farm equipment there just being picked out by the light. It is a most beautiful drawing, and a rarity, because Max Meldrum, I think because he was so determined to demonstrate that painting was about tone, that either he destroyed all of his drawings or he never did them. But in those early days, he did some very beautiful drawings, and that is a very beautiful drawing. One of the fascinating things too, I think, in this exhibition is that there's a range of mediums. There's watercolours, there's pastel. Pastel is the great sort of unregarded part of any art history, because nobody quite knows what to do with pastels. Beautiful pastel in the front room by Norman Carter, of a couple walking past the art gallery of New South Wales at twilight. Typical of the sort of moody work that characterised the turn of the century pastelist. I particularly like also in this exhibition the drawings by Nora Heysen. It's beautiful drawings by Nora Heysen. When I was at the Portrait Gallery, we acquired one of Nora Heysen's self-portraits that she painted in London. In fact, the drawings here are drawings from her London years, which was 1934 to 1937. And she said to me something really very interesting, which has always stayed with me about self-portraiture. She said, I always painted a self-portrait when I went into a new place. It was the way that I found myself as an artist in that place. Beautiful thought. And I think in the drawing in this exhibition, you can see the way in which she's trying to do two things. She's trying to establish herself, but also she's trying to bring in all of these design ideas that she was picking up in London. It's really a series of curves. You can see that arm, she's actually trying to make it into a curve. So it's a very instructive drawing in terms of an artist's thought process, and of course that's one thing that drawings do beautifully. The great shift I think in the latter part of the 20th century in Australian drawing was there were artists who believed that drawing, in order to succeed, had to be authentic and absolutely spontaneous work of the mind and the hand working together. And in this exhibition, there's a very nice pairing of drawing by Sidney Nolan and Joy Hester, both artists who believed that to be authentic, a work had to be instinctual, very direct. It's there, the idea is it's on the paper. And of course, the exhibition also has more the other end of the spectrum, and that's the very considered drawing, and there's beautiful considered drawings in this exhibition. by Fred Williams and Robert Clinch and a whole range of artists. So, you know, as I said, I could expound on a whole lot of the details of these Australian drawings, but I just happen to like the way in which this exhibition is beautifully shaped from the 1850s to the present. And in conclusion, I'll just say one thing about my time as curator of Australian drawings. In a way, I always harboured a disappointment. And that disappointment was that there weren't collectors in Australia who had an idea to create a history of Australian art through drawing. It struck me at the time, and I was doing it professionally, if you like, building up the collection at the National Gallery, that you could actually say some really interesting things, create a unique and fascinating collection which really represented the entirety of Australian art through drawings. You could do it really interestingly, and you could probably do it relatively economically. And to have more collectors who have that kind of idea to develop a collection with a real overarching theme and purpose which can really help us to understand some aspect of Australian art. There are certainly examples of people who are doing that in particular areas, but it strikes me that drawings are, you know, really something that could form the basis of a really fascinating collection. So it's great fun to be here. Thanks, Lauraine. Very enjoyable to think about Australian drawing again and to enjoy such kind of gems from the history of Australian art. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.